Intro is Shortstop Dynasty Production Rankings. Tatis, Trey, Bo, and Co. Tonight we're going to cover 60 plus. It's time for Dingers.
This is Dingers, way more than fantasy baseball. We keep it real when we talk and knock it straight out the park. Let's see the stats. What's the average draft position? What kind of plays you making? Check the wins above replacement. Check the lineups and the points. This I gotta see. What's your path to victory? Are they aiming for a dynasty? Get points going head to head. Please don't do me no favors. We're always watching waivers. Ain't no minor league. This is major. Yeah, Dingers. Let's go.
Welcome to Dingers, the only fantasy baseball podcast for smart people. It's not just Dansby Swanson that wins you championships. That's why week in and week out we're delivering tips and strategies to help you live that straight up OG lifestyle. Tyler Childs joined again, as always, by Robbie Baseball from the Murder Room. What's happening, Robbie?
Oh, nothing. Just wearing my non-baseball apparel. I hope everybody has had one Bengal of a day.
Oof. That pun hurt.
Oh, sorry. It wasn't my best.
So speaking of puns, do you remember the internet video about it was and the energy drink it was like a really old internet video. It's like, and it goes snake eyes at the end. I forget what it's actually called. We looked it up. It's like raspberry. No,
I don't know.
How about rawberry? That was it. No, okay.
No.
Complete miss. But anyway, there's a part in the middle where it's like, these aren't regular puns, these are turbo puns. Right?
Oh, wow.
It's just like it's an excellent, I'll send it to you. It's an excellent, like, old school internet video that
turbo
needs
puns.
To be it's pretty excellent. I might even actually add it now that I've said it. I might even add it as a video we can add into our live podcast here. So as we're getting into it today, Robbie, we're going to be covering shortstops. But as you said, Bengals, huge day today on the football field, upsetting the Chiefs. So, that's what we like to talk about here on Dingers. We're talking upsets all the time. We like
football.
yeah. But we do like to upset the apple cart, though, Robbie.
That's true.
We are not your straight shooters. Let's find a generic list and produce it. That's just not what we do here.
We're very cutting edge, right up to the intro. As I was writing the intro, as the countdown was coming, I'm like, I'm gonna wing the last bit of it, and then the very first thing I said was intro, which I laughed at myself, like I just read what I just wrote, the word intro. But other than that, Ron Burgundy? Yeah, that's exactly what it was. Yeah, I am doing the intro. But the fun part is it's been a long day. I did, as I said to you, Ty, I did some super uber in depth for the top 30 of this list. And once it gets outside that, as we're going to talk about, because we got 60 guys to talk about, 62 that actually got rankings. There are a lot of guys here who have unconfirmed timelines. And that was one of the things that somebody mentioned to me. Why are your rankings like anti-prospect? And they're not at all. But you're going to hear all the names of the shortstops that are supposed to do something, that are part of a team right now. Now, what you're not going to hear are the guys that we don't think are going to do much the next 2.5+ years, because they're not worth discussion when we're talking about MLB production. Because it's one thing to have prospect trade value, because that is important. That is a factor. But when you're providing zero actual assumed production, which is something we talked a lot about with Wander Franco, even last year, we were saying like the odds of him coming up any earlier than late season are so slim. Well, he came up, like that was huge, but we didn't think he would, because Tampa Bay wouldn't want to pay him. And that, now we know what Tampa Bay actually did.
And the reality is too, like we're not talking about prospects in these lists. Like we're very much defining how these players are going to help your team in the next 5 years. That's what our production list is. That's what we're doing here. But at the end of the day, we'll cover prospects. We'll cover draft review. We cover the Rule 5 draft. Those are where those of you that are looking for the prospect heavy lists or, tips and pointers, they're going to fall in those episodes, and they're going to be closer to the drafts or the J2 signings and that sort of thing. So, we're going to be into those categories later in the year when they're relevant. We've had a weird, 12, 18 months of baseball. Looks like we're going to have about 3 or 4 months of it, but once we get through that, we'll kind of get back to some consistency on those things. But as we do, and as we have always been consistent on, we'll start here. A long time ago, someone decided to put stuff in glass bottles. In some of these bottles, they put juice or milk, and that was stupid. Today, only alcohol and a few other products remain in the containers from the gods. It's time for beers and bourbon, because good advice only comes in a bottle. Yeah. Mediocre pop.
That was okay. There's one.
One.
And that's the one.
Are we pouring one out for a homie or something? What's going on here?
No, we are doing the Crown Flow. Now, anyone that's watching on the live stream, which you can find us at Dinger's Pod for the live stream, you can find us at the YouTube Dinger's Podcast channel. Daddy's doing a Crown Float tonight.
Okay.
And for anybody who doesn't know, that is where you take a cider. And I have the Taw's Winery apple cider. That is my bottom. There's the Taw's. For anybody, it's kind of neat looking. My wife bought it for me. She's a kind lady. And then you take tried and true Guinness, boom, boom, and you pour it on top. Cool. And if you're good at it, like I used to be, it's super easy.
That just sounds like so much extra work.
It is. I'm going to see if I can do it on camera here. Just cause.
Oh, it's going to only end poorly.
No way, Jose.
Good for ratings, bad for you.
Good for rating. Yeah. Podcast listeners are like, all right, fast forward 30 seconds. Fast forward 30 seconds. I will say this is actually going pretty well. I got some solid separation here.
For you, I don't know what I'm watching. I can't tell if this is like the secret cough syrup medicine or what we're dealing with here.
Well, the goal here, I was a bartender for a while, so this was something I would often push on people back before the $8 drink.
Minor flex.
Yeah. I would often push this. It was an $8 drink back when pints of beer were like $4.50. So if you can see here, we got the clear down low. Then she gets dark and a little cloudy. And obviously my screen's kind of blocking here. This is a solid pour for one hand. I'm happy. Very much like I am with the shortstop position, which we are going to talk about tonight. And I don't know if the best thing to do, Ty, maybe is until we get to the top 30. Do you want to just alternate 5?
Yeah.
You say your piece on your 5, then the next 5 I'll do mine, and then that way we can move a bit. So I'll highlight. Do you want to do 62 to 50, whatever it's going to be, or do you want me
definitely.
to start?
Yeah, I'll jump in. We got Freddie Galvis down at 72 or 62. Sorry, had a rough season in Philly last year. I still think there's something in this bat, but I don't think there's a lot of years left here. So I think that's really where he kind of falls off the map for me. At the end of the day, we could see a small resurgence, but it's going to have to be a really good scenario here, and it's certainly not going to be a 5-year run. So I think that's why I've got him farther down on this list. Ahead of him, we got Richie Martin in Baltimore. He just kind of is there. He's going to get probably some opportunity to get some minor at-bats until we start to see that farm system kick out a little bit of growth here in the next couple of years. It is coming in Baltimore. We're just still not quite at that corner yet. Elvis Andrus is just kind of fallen off a cliff the last 2 seasons. I don't know what we can expect for Andrus. That's why he's down there. Very similar to Galvis. Could be a resurgence, but there's a lot of question marks around Elvis Andrus these days, and better alternatives out there with a similar profile. So ahead of him, Chris Owings, who just a guy that continues to flop around a little bit, but getting older. And we're not really sure where he's going to be, what he's going to be.
He got hurt last year, Ty, but he was an absolute darling prior to the injury, because he was in Colorado and he was just doing really, really well. So that's the only reason why he's of note here is look to see where he goes and then, decide if you want him to be one of your final bench pieces, something like that.
Yeah, and he's going to give you multi-position eligibility, which will be nice in the leagues where you're playing full outfields, especially. I think he's going to probably give you some extra value. Tim Beckham's next on this list. I think falls into the same kind of category as Owings. He's on Team PED this upcoming season. We've seen pockets of baseball that could very much been directly related to the cheating of great baseball. But at the same time, there is enough history here to maybe take a flyer in your deeper formats. If you're in a shallow league or under 20 teams, you should never even see Tim Beckham. But if you're in those deeper leagues, he could be a really valuable piece later in the season with some injuries and stuff. And I'll pass it over to you, Robbie.
Sure. Yeah.
Next, anyone you want to comment on additionally in my group there?
No, I don't think, like, I mean, Chris Owens was the only guy. Freddie Galvis, he signs and he's okay. And that's it. And one of the things is he going to get a contract? And teams like Baltimore, he's already circled through. So I don't know if starting is going to be the road that he gets to anymore. And that's why he's as far back as he is. So Nick Gordon, Minnesota prospect, not a whole lot going on here. Again, like Minnesota has Royce Lewis, who we're going to mention further up as a possibility. They also have the ability to just move other players around. Gordon's going to have to come up lightning in a bottle. Orlando Arcia, we've talked nonstop about his ability to play defense. It's the offensive side that we just cannot get a hold of with him. And again, 30-team leagues, that's really the only time you're going to be looking at him outside of injuries in season, and maybe he's on a hot stretch. And which, again, that's not dynasty. That's waiver wire, smaller league, keeper, stuff like that. Terran Vavra, who was last episode, we got all confused with the Baltimore Colorado trade in 2020, where it was Tyler Nevin, and I had mistakenly written in whatever non-Grand Levine prospect that it was. And Toglia, thank you. But either way, both of the Colorado prospects have a lot to prove. This former Colorado prospect is in a very similar position where it doesn't look like he's going to be given a spot. We're going to talk about Baltimore guys that are up ahead of him that have a better shot long-term as well. So he might be kind of like a Dwight Smith Jr., who we've talked about before as an outfielder who like comes up and doesn't suck, but he's just not getting enough playing time and he's not valuable enough to the organization that they're really going to give it to him. Will Wilson, interesting story with Will Wilson is that he was essentially part of a trade where contract from the Angels were dumped to San Francisco. They paid and bought out. It doesn't matter who it was, but somebody that once upon a time was fantasy relevant for a short period of time. And Will Wilson was a first-round draft pick of Los Angeles and then traded to San Francisco. Slow develop. I think he was a high school drafted guy. And my computer wants me to restart.
Zach Kozar dump was what it was.
Thank you, Zach Kozar. Yeah, and Kozar did have that brief period of time where he was fantasy relevant. Yolbert Sanchez gets playing time, but I don't know. He's not winning the leagues. He's absolute depth, and that's kind of where we are with Sanchez.
Well, no, Yolbert Sanchez, I think, is going to be a guy that we want to pay attention to.
Really?
Well, this is the Cuban, right? Coming in, the international guy that signed I want to say in 2020. He didn't make it above AA last year, but he hit 343, 838 at AA last year. So a little bit of pop there, 369 OBP. So there's some major league tool sets there. I think he is going to start in AAA, but I do think we see Sanchez this year. And I think realistically, we're probably going to be wrong here on Sanchez. I think we've got him a little farther back than he should be.
I just don't see how he gets up, right? As a 25-year-old this year, I just don't see where the playing time is, and that's part of the knockback because he's just, I don't know. That's all. He's got more to prove, I guess.
I would agree, and it's the depth issue for me. That's why I wanted to point it out, because I think the depth issue is really what will be his biggest flaw. But I do think there's a potential for him to find some time at second base in Chicago. So there is a bit of an opening there, right? And
I guess the franchise did leave, right? Franchise left.
Yeah. So I think there's some upside there. And then I'm just going to go back to Nick Gordon. We did see Nick Gordon at the end of last year. Nothing like overwhelmingly spectacular out of Nick Gordon, but I do think in deeper formats, I think there's some value here. Very similar profile to Tim Beckham, who we mentioned earlier, but 240 batting average last year. Just 30. What do we got? 279 at bats projected for this year.
200 last year, Ty, in that. And the problem. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you. I just want to say the problem is that there isn't like a position that he just gets to take this year. You know what I mean? Like best case scenario is he's 26th man on the roster and he's 26 years old. So
we're not going to
that's
see
the struggle I see.
We're not going to see Royce Lewis till the middle of summer, right? So they have a void at shortstop.
I don't. Yeah, but
Or
Lewis is never. I don't even know if Lewis has. I'll have to look up whatever my report on him. But I just saw Lewis as having a huge gap in playing time. He's got to make up for before we start talking about MLB time.
well, you've got
But
Polanco and the soft hitting guy at second.
Ariz.
I can't. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
No, not Ariz.
Arreaz. Arias.
I don't know. Arias, yeah, something like that. Whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, the guy that like hits for contact, right? So
Yeah.
there's going to be at bats. That's what I'm trying to say. There's going to be at bats. We'll probably see 200, 300 at bats for Nick Gordon this season. That's what I wanted to comment on.
Okay.
Jumping ahead, we've got an interesting section here of a wide range of guys. So Carson Tucker, who is in Cleveland, you know, we're a little early here for Carson Tucker. We probably won't see him till 2024, realistically. So this is a guy that can be good, and the biggest problem for Carson Tucker is he's got 2 or 3 guys ahead of him. That's going to be his biggest issue in Cleveland. Santiago Espinal did nothing but what Toronto asked of him last year, and he's being given zero chance at a starting position this year in Toronto. Very similar to what we just talked about with Nick Gordon. There's going to be at bats for him in Toronto, but they are going to be depth at bats. I don't see him starting a lot of games against righties. Could see him against the lefties. That's probably the reasonable use. Shea Whitcomb is a guy that I've been watching closely for the last couple of years. You know, when we had Mason on talking some of the college steals a few years ago, he turned us on to Shea Whitcomb. And honestly, this guy is probably, if we see Correa leave Houston, Shea Whitcomb could be the shortstop in Houston this year. Like, that's very possible. And I don't think people have any idea who this guy is in most formats. But at AAA, at across 2 levels last year, he hit 293. He had 23 home runs.
But it was A and high A, Ty. That's the only thing I want to say. Just it's A and high A. Agree. He needs more at bats. But you're right, totally under the radar. Completely under the radar right now.
Yeah, I think this is like a dark horse to win at bats. Like, this is an advanced bat though, right? Like, you know, we talk high A, but this is an advanced high A bat. And I'm actually shocked we didn't see him at AA last year with those numbers. I think that was a mistake on Houston's part, realistically. So moving ahead, Robert Paulson is an international guy that we saw, a very high-end international guy, Oakland's number 1 guy. What is it? Summer of 19, Robbie, I think, if that sounds right.
You know what? I honestly can't remember at this moment in time
either. But this is a guy that we know is a very good prospect. Like, this is somebody that, you know, is been talked about for a few years. Shouldn't surprise anybody anywhere. If you're playing deep dynasty baseball, you're going to know about Robert Paulson.
He was a first round draft, whether it was 19 off season to 20 or the 20 off season to 21. He would have been gone in your first round. I think it was 2 J2s ago. 3 J2? Yeah. 3 J2 classes ago. So that would have been the 2020 class. Sorry. It's hard to remember because you have the draft, MLB draft in 1 year, and the next, like that off season, you have the J2. And he would have signed in 2020.
Yeah, and he was a big time signing. They spent a lot of money on him. I think they spent like 4 or 5 million. It was a big ticket. And so this guy's going to get some organizational benefit just because he's the guy they spent all the money on, but he better produce, kind of thing. Ahead of him, a guy that's, again, I think sneaky under a lot of radars, but we've talked about him enough here that you should know about him, Gunnar Henderson in Baltimore. This is going to be somebody that I think moves up a lot of boards this year. And I don't think he's high enough on most boards out there. But he's definitely the shortstop of the future right now in Baltimore. And they do have a couple good infield prospects, but this one to me is the best. He made it up to 57 on Baseball America this year. So if you don't know about him, he's going to continue to move. Last year across 3 levels, 258, 826 OPS, 17 home runs though as a 20-year-old. So definitely excited about that, and I think we got lots to look forward here for this year. He's going to start at AA in all likelihood. That's where he finished last year. So you're going to see Gunnar Henderson, you know, turn some heads this year.
Yeah, and he had a really hot start to last year, which was what got him on the radar for a lot of people who don't do the deep dives and just look at prospects from a kind of top 100. We've talked about it before where guys are like, I'll make a trade. It's got to be a top 100 prospect. And a guy like Gunnar Henderson was not on those boards at that point in time. And now, we've seen what has happened as these guys go up. Somebody else who is a long-term project with the Cubs now, or sorry, not now, but since being drafted, is Ed Howard. And he comes in at 47 for us. Much, much closer and more realistic, and possibly the guy who could take the biggest jump on our entire board, Ty, is the next guy up, Bryson Stott with Philly. He's going to be playing this year at his age 24 season. High average contact hitter with Philly, and boy, did they ever need to turn the page at shortstop. If Didi is back and Didi is good, this could be the swan song for him and turn the page over to Bryson Stott. He finished last year at AAA, only had 10 games, but it was enough. Like, he can compete because he was good at A and AA last year as well. Xavier Edwards, that's right, the slapdick prospect as far as Blake Snell is concerned. He's still in Tampa Bay, and the hype train since that trade, I think, is worn off, and Xavier Edwards is now kind of like, I think also the fact that it's Tampa Bay, a lot of people just have hesitation as far as they're just so crowded. What's going to happen? And that's part of my ranking evaluation. We talked about it with every position so far. If they're blocked going up, there needs to be a way for them to sneak out at bats at the major league level. And it's going to be really tough for Edwards to do that. However, he's only entering his age 22 season, just like the next guy up, Bryce Terang with Milwaukee, who I think finished last year at AAA. I meant to double check that right before we started, and I failed to do so. I know he was in Biloxi. Oh, I've scrolled past it because I'm great at computers. He did finish in AAA. So we had 73 games in AA, 44 with Nashville at AAA, and a 245 average, 261 average as a pro. And he's been fairly consistent with what he does, which is not power based. He's a stolen base type guy, 20 bags last year. And with Milwaukee, that could be sneaky good. That's like division winning team, brings them up, wants him to move around the diamond, right? And that could help out for next year, and then he could really be set up for 2023 and beyond. Last guy is Freddie Nova with Houston. Similar thing, like these are all, this whole group is just prospects who are on the rise and moving up the systems, and we'll be interested, or I will be interested to see what's up in spring training with Nova, where Houston has them set up. And as you said, Ty, there could be a major gap where everybody in the organization just gets a bump up.
Well, I think here, like, this is a guy, Freddie Nova specifically, that needs to prove himself this year, right? Very limited power numbers, not a lot of great production. We saw, 308 average in 2018, which is looking like a bit of an anomaly at this point. So definitely some concern on the long term here with Nova, a guy that you can look at one of two ways: you're either selling or buying. It depends on your risk profile. Bryce Terang's a guy that, for me, I'm staying away from in general. I just don't think the tools are elite enough to be an impactful fantasy guy at the major league level. I do think he's a major leaguer. I just don't think he's the kind of guy that's going to hold a starting position. And I think the trade for Willy Adames speaks volumes to how fast Milwaukee believes some of their shortstops are going to go. So that reality suggests that, Terang's not really going to be a guy. Ed Howard, for me, kind of is kind of similar to Terang. I don't see him as a major leaguer at the same level. He's still very, very young. Obviously, that can change, but I'm not ready to put him in the major league pipeline just yet. So I'd be staying away from a lot of those guys. Xavier Edwards, contact profile. So depth guy is where he kind of projects at this point in fantasy. More of a waiver wire than a starting position guy. Depth thing that you touched on, Robbie's bang on. Moving ahead here, we got a really interesting lot here. This group is just Miguel Rojas in Miami obviously has been a fairly productive guy. And for those of you in contract leagues that own Miguel Rojas, you probably paid nothing for him. And if you paid too much for him, you're going to regret that as well. But it's a guy that's just been mildly productive over the last couple of seasons with Miami and their kind of rebuild here. I expect a lot of the same, but at the end of the day, there's replacements coming for him, so he has a short lifespan. Jeremiah Jackson, a guy that, Robbie, you were on really early with Jeremiah Jackson in LA with the Angels, and this is a guy that had some productive numbers I don't have it in front of me, Robbie, but what did he end up finishing with last season? Do you have that in front of
He
you?
dipped last year. So 2019 was his power breakout year with 25 dingers, I think. Last year he
Mhm.
only had 10. I believe he missed time with an injury. I don't have it again in front of me at the moment, but his problem, his issue, is just going to be consistency. Now, there's been a
Well,
lot. Yeah.
I mean, I do. I just got the numbers up. So
Yep.
188 at bats last year. Obviously, missed a good chunk of season. 906 OPS in those at bats. So all the power profile. And if you look at it, 10 home runs in 188 at bats, pretty good. We're pretty happy with those kind of numbers out of the shortstop position, especially when you have a guy that's just 21. Right? There's still growth here. I think this is a very positive opportunity. And I think honestly, he should be on a lot of people's buy list, Robbie. I think you would probably agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. What I was saying was the issue with him is the fact that I don't know the progression. So he's further back than I would like him to be within, like, there's a guy like Royce Lewis, who's 21 years old playing this year. He's up higher because he's got this incredible fantasy value because he's been getting ranked up and up and up. Even when he had down years, he's still been like getting this helium under him. Well, you've got a guy who might actually be able to produce at a better level in Jeremiah Jackson, but you don't know when you can reasonably expect to see him. So if it's not until 2023 is his first shot, and that could be like a 200 at bat season, well, that affects how we're doing these production rankings. So even though I would personally like to see him up higher, I just don't know when we can expect him to have the shortstop position. But I certainly am going around looking to collect him. Now, as Ty said earlier in the episode, when we're talking prospects, we'll get into the minutia of who we actually think will be the best for you long term. But
Well,
when
and the
we're
big
talking about a window, Jackson, in my mind, is a little bit further back in the window. But I mean, then you got to get a plug like Cole Tucker ahead of him.
Yeah. I mean, for me, Jackson's for sure a 2024 guy. And the big reason I think is going to be he's having trouble with pitch selection based on what the stats kind of hint at. Like he did Arizona Fall League this year, 161, but he had 23 strikeouts and 56 at bats. That's obviously alarming. But it's also essentially a level and a half above where
Right.
he's been playing, right? So, that's also playing outside of it. So this could explain why LA has been a little slow with him. They clearly see something, either pitch selection or ability to turn on high velo stuff, right? One of those two things. If we looked at, I bet you, if we look closer, we'd see one of two things: either he's lighting up the fastball and struggling with the curveball, or the opposite. Which I would guess based on these stats that, without looking closer, that he's feasting on off speed and having trouble with the heaters. But next on the list, you mentioned Cole Tucker. This is a guy that I think is just a forgotten soldier, right? This is not a nobody prospect. This is not a nobody major leaguer. Pittsburgh's got a really good farm coming. Cole Tucker has kind of a prove it season in front of him here in Pittsburgh. I think he's going to have a shot at some at-bats this year. I do think it's going to be in the outfield, and I think that's going to be different than what a lot of people believe. But I also think he will start the season battling the shortstop position, because I think a lot of people are under the assumption we're going to see O'Neal Cruz early. There's a 0% chance he's up before whatever deadline exists contractually after this lockout because of where Pittsburgh's at. So I do think Cole Tucker will be given some at-bats at shortstop, but I think eventually we'll see the majority of them in the outfield. Ahead of him, Jose Iglesias, who we love here, a guy that just is a productive major league shortstop. But he doesn't give you 4,000 home runs, and that's why he continues to be punted every single year. But then comes up clutch when people need him to be in a lineup, right? I cannot for the life of me figure out why this guy doesn't get more time as a defensive wizard, yet teams continually are happy to bring Anderson Simmons onto their team, who does almost nothing with the bat, plays, relatively the same level of defense, and yet Iglesias is the guy fighting for a job every single year. I find that really hard to believe. Yep, go ahead.
Like Iglesias with Detroit, I think that's when we kind of figured out, like, hey, he's actually a good shortstop that everybody hates. And then he goes to goes to Baltimore and repeats the process and just continues to do that. So it's like, okay, I'll just wait. Everybody's going to forget about him. I'll pick him up, whether he's a starter or my backup. And even in a big league, people are, 20 plus team leagues, people are forgetting about him. He's got really low value. The trick with those bigger leagues is if you have a free agency, especially auction free agency, if he's on a contract wherever he is, you need to be going and getting him right when free agency starts, because that's when that owner who currently has him might be thinking about another player that's in free agency, and boom, you can scoop him up for less. If you wait, especially, I mean, we saw it last year, Ty, in one of our big money leagues, you waited until first base dwindled down. There were 3 teams that were looking for the only 2 remaining free agent first basemen, like legitimate starting free agent first baseman, and they both went for over market value simply because there was a shortage and teams were trying to wiggle and get trades done, and it just couldn't happen. So if you go right as soon as your free agency starts, then that's your best chance to get a guy like Iglesias, who you can just like put him in when you're ready. You got an injury, you got a prospect, you got something you're not sure of. Maybe like the first guy I'm going to talk about, or the next guy I'm going to talk about. You're going to want to have a Jose Iglesias if you got the next guy I'm going to talk about.
Yeah, the last guy in my group here is Didi Gregorius, who's a guy we love in a lot of ways, but we haven't had a lot of fun with him the last couple seasons. It's 209 last year, 13 home runs, just a tick above the shortened season, 10 home runs the previous year. I think there's still enough here to see major league production. Now he's still with Philly this season. This will be the last year before hitting free agency. He's still just 31. He can still play shortstop. So I think this is a guy that, especially in redraft formats, I think you're going to see him drafted way later than he should be, because I think people are going to forget about him a little bit. So I think if you're looking for a cheap buy in a short-term scenario in any of the deeper leagues, I would target Didi, because I think he's going to be the starting guy here in Philly. I don't think they have any reason to change that or challenge that. I don't know what they're going to do if they sign one of the big dogs and move him. I don't know if they're going to, put him at second or what they would maybe do in Philly. But at the end of the day, this is a left-handed bat that still's got a lot of power in it. So I would be looking to acquire it if I'm looking on the free agent market. This is a guy that I would be thinking is a relatively low acquisition cost with high upside potential.
Yeah, and again, we're talking about a 32-year-old this year, not a 36-year-old who's, just trying to, get innings, so to speak, right?
Fun,
like this is
fun thing really quick. His full name is Merrickson Julius Gregorius. Fun fact. I didn't know that until right now.
That's interesting. Yeah, that is interesting. Okay, so the guy I was going to talk about where you want Iglesias on your roster also is if you happen to be the Jeter Downs owner in your league. Jeter Downs, who was traded straight up for Mookie Betts. Nobody else was in that deal. He is a boomer bust shortstop power bat. That's what he is. Maybe he moves to second base. Makes sense if he moves to second base. But
was that a joke on the trade? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, there were lots of other players. There
was chaos. There was actually only 2 at the end of the day. It was Verdugo and Downs.
I was going to say that was
supposed to be Gratterall, but then for whatever reason, Boston decided they didn't want Gratterall. I still can't figure out why they did. I still can't figure out why they didn't take Gratterall. That just doesn't make any sense.
I think it was something to do with his arm, and then the Dodgers were like, "No problem, guy with arm trouble. Well, you just stick with us." But anyway, so Downs in 19, which is when everybody got their hard on for him, 24 dingers in A and Double A, but that's all that he was doing at that point in time was the power. 888 OPS was good, 60 walks to 107 strikeouts. Last year, didn't have a full season of at-bats, but his batting average was under 200. OPS was just over 6 and 14 dingers. He also got 39 runs and 39 RBIs. Not great. Not what you want when you're trading the franchise. Not what you want when you're a dynasty owner and you're looking for a power shortstop prospect, because the list of power shortstop prospects or just legitimate future starting shortstops, the list is huge. So Jeter Downs comes with a lot of risk. So just be careful if you are the guy that's got him, and make sure you have one of those Didi, Jose Iglesias type backups. Brandon Crawford would be another great backup to get. I mean, he's your starter. He would be your starter. He had a great year last year, entering his age 35 season with San Francisco, and Crawford wire to wire was solid for us. But we just don't know how much we've got left with him. So enjoy what you got. Royce Lewis, 35, ranked 35th for us. He's a 21, or will be playing this year, is 21-year-old coming back from Tommy John, and unsure exactly how the push is going to go from Minnesota side with him. If they're aggressive, then we might see him moving up as high as AAA. I think it's more likely that he's just going to slowly come back this year. And I mean, again, spring training is going to tell us a lot about what's up with Royce Lewis. Andrelton Simmons, as Ty talked about before, he's a free agent. He finished last year with Minnesota, and he'll be entering his age 32 season. So just like Jose Iglesias, same age player, same with Didi. Simmons is looking for a job. He's going to get one somewhere. It's just a matter of, is he going to start wherever it is that he goes, and how much time is he going to get? We know he's not providing us anything offensively, but if you're in a league where, just getting plate appearances, maybe a points league, like 2.2 points per game might be high for him, 2 to 2.2. I mean, depending on the league size, it could be a big thing. Next guy up is Ha-Seong Kim. He was not NL Rookie of the Year or MVP. Or close, did not receive votes, but he did have over 2 WAR, Ty, which I saw and thought that was interesting. But he does now.
Does he pick up value from sitting on the bench?
Hey, he moved around the diamond a bit, but he does have one major league season now under his belt, and I think there's a lot of bounce back coming. Now, last year I ranked him as 8. I thought he was just going to come in and rake. Ty said there's going to be a lot of problems. Ty had him ranked much further back, and Ty was right on this one. There was a good reason to pump the brakes on Ha-Seong Kim. I was aggressive with him. Most leagues I tried to get him in. I did get him in one. I traded Tyler Glasnow and got the pick that became Ha-Seong Kim, and I also got Luis Garcia of Washington, and then I proceeded to trade Luis Garcia to get Kyle Lewis of Seattle, because I just like to hurt myself. But Ha-Seong Kim, for anyone who's got him and he's on a rookie contract, he's going into his age 26 season. He hopefully can move around with San Diego this year and just be a better player. And let's just see if we can get him to be a league average plus guy for us, right? Like a 260 average. If he can still steal 10 bags, maybe he can get 10 dingers this year, and we can start on that work. It's going to be a slow climb. I don't think, superstar is not Ha-Seong Kim next year. But we just don't know what's going to happen. There's also this weird Tatis thing that we're going to have to talk about when we get up to him, as far as what's he going to be long-term. And then Ty, you would like to talk about possibly a future teammate of Ha-Seong Kim.
Yeah, and I think this, to me, is the biggest reason why Ha-Seong Kim is less valuable beyond, I struggled. I put Ha-Seong Kim at 32, and that hurt me. I feel like that's still too high because he's got way too much competition. And unless they eliminate the top part of the strike zone at the major league level, Ha-Seong Kim is going to struggle for a while. And I think he has the potential to be non-tendered as early as 2024, because you do have the next guy on this list, CJ Abrams, knocking on the door. You also have Victor Acosta coming later in the organization as well. So there's going to be a ton of pressure on Kim this season to be relevant. And I just don't know that he's going to do that. So, I think that's a big issue. CJ Abrams has all the skill sets. This is the guy to watch out for in the San Diego system. I think there's an outside shot, and this will get to our Tatis scenario. One of Abrams or Tatis is going to be the center fielder. That's the way I think this plays out. Yeah.
Okay. I was just going to chime in with the fact that he played Double-A last year, was 4 years younger than the average person at Double-A, and he came out with a slick 296 batting average, 782 OPS. What were his dingers? The problem, this is the problem, 2, right? So everybody that's all hyped and, he's a top 10, he's a whatever. He's a top 10 in what format? Because they all count home runs, right? Depending on your points league, it could be worth 7. Roto, obviously it's 1, it's that, but it also gets you a run in an RBI. His issue is that he is not a power hitter, which means he needs to be your Jose Altuve high average and ideally grow into the extra bases and all that. But even last year in, 142 at bats, we had
162 at bats in 2021.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
14 doubles.
Yeah. 14 doubles, no triples, but that's the thing that we need to see climb with him, right? Is the doubles, the triples. And that's the pump the brakes thing, which a lot of other places aren't going to say that to you. They're going to say, the value, the potential, the whatever. Right. Until he's facing major league pitchers who are consistently throwing 95, and he's not able to get hard contact, which he already isn't doing enough at the lower levels. And again, he is super young for this age, but if he continues to move up, he'll be a 23-year-old playing Major League Baseball. And that could become a problem for dynasty owners who are like, Well, what the heck, all the rankers? You told us
Well,
he was going to be, so good, and he can't. There's no power here, right? Like that's what the big rub on Nick Madrigal for so many people. CJ Abrams has as much or as many professional home runs as Nick Madrigal, and everybody craps on Madrigal, but yet Abrams is a top 10 guy.
Yeah, I agree with that point at the end there. The big thing here is that Abrams in 2019 hit 401 in very similar to a bats to last season. So I think he's going to grow into some power. Now, is he going to be, a Tatis 40 home run kind of guy? No, he's not going to be that. But could he be 20 to 25 with a 320 average? Maybe, right? And so that's what I think we should aim for here. But I do think he's going to grow into some power. 6'2", 185. So he's going to put the frame on to generate a little bit more power moving forward. So I don't think there's that much to be scared of on the power side. I just think it's a matter of proof in the pudding. And I think we want to wait as if you're not already a CJ Abrams owner, I think you're waiting for the prospect hype to die down. I don't think you're paying current market price to go get him. I think that's a mistake because there's just too much risk here. You're better off, talking about some of the guys Rob loves to love that we'll talk about a little bit further up this list.
Oh, next guy on your list, I'd rather have.
100%. Yeah, 100%. Right now, 100%. Cost of acquisition, it's not even close. Tyler Freeman in Cleveland, like I completely
same
agree
player.
with that.
Same player.
He's
2 years older.
That.
But he's got the same ticks. He's an average guy. He doesn't have the power. But the difference is also in an organization that might have playing time for him.
Yeah, but the rest of the team around him sucks. That's the other problem.
You suck. Cleveland is fine. They are doing a great job.
Yeah, no, I mean, to your point, though, bang on. 2 home runs for Tyler Freeman last year, 323 average at AA, 842 OPS. We like the numbers. They're, like you said, very similar profile. I do think, though, there's a difference. And I do think it's the power, and Abrams comes out ahead on that one in the long run. So that's why I made that point. So long-term, CJ Abrams has more risk, but more upside. Tyler Freeman, very similar profile, less cost right now. So that's the difference between those two. You can buy either of these guys. I think both of them are major leaguers. I don't think either of them are necessarily going to hurt you. I just think if you're not in a position to rebuild, Abrams is a stretch. Freeman might be more affordable if you're competing. Ahead of him, teammate, formerly Andres, or not formerly, now potential teammate Andres Jimenez in Cleveland. Kind of got the back seat last year to Ahmad Rosario. Cleveland wanted to season Jimenez a little bit more. There's still something here. I still believe he's a bit of a lightweight. I'm not sure he's going to be fantasy darling in any way. 10 to 15 home runs with a reasonable batting average is the upside here. Still reasonable young at 21. This was one of the centerpieces of the Lindor move to the Mets, right? This was one of the big pieces that came back. So, there is some pedigree here, if you will, that I think you should at least note. There's lots of production through his minor league seasons, as high as 9 home runs at AA in the Mets organization. And he hit 10 home runs last year at AAA in Cleveland. So 15 on the season last year across those two levels. That's kind of where I think he's going to end up being 10 to 15, couple maybe 20s mixed in there. But just a reasonable prospect, nothing to overpay for to go get, which I think a lot of people made that mistake last season, Robbie, when they were talking about Jimenez. They overpaid preseason thinking this guy was a big deal because he was in the Lindor trade.
Well, there was
he's
also
okay.
There was a lot of talk. Sorry, he's entering his age 22 year. Sorry, he was going into his age 22 year last year, entering 23 this year. But he was supposed to be this he's definitely going to be the second baseman. He's, it's going to be him and Rosario, and it's all going to work out great. The whole plan was made up in our fantasy owners' heads, our own heads. This is what's going to happen, and then he's going to get all these bags, and he's going to steal bases. The average is going to be good. Whoa, what a steal! And then he doesn't start the year with the big league club, and even spring training was misleading to us because they were pairing him up with Rosario, and everybody was like, this is what you want to see. I think that was around the time we may have had Dave from High Stakes Heat on with us, and he was talking about the fact that maybe they paired him up today or something like that, and whatever. I definitely recall that, like, that was the scouting analysis was like, look at how good this is going to be. But there's still another guy in Cleveland that's like got the pedigree above Jimenez, and he's younger.
There's a couple, to be honest.
Well, yeah, that's true.
I mean,
they are not short on shortstop options.
Correct. Well, they've kind of become the major league factory, right? Like they kind of are them and San Diego, I think, are the two teams that are deep at that position. Although Toronto, I would say, is entering that conversation. Or
when we sort out prospects, Ty.
Yeah.
Sorry, when we sort out the prospects, we'll have to see what team does have the most. And I mean, always Colorado, right? Like, they've got a million prospects. They're really good. I'm joking, everybody. But we'll get into, who actually has, of the potential future major leaguers, who has the most. But you're right. San Diego, Cleveland, and Toronto does now, I think, have at least 3 decent options.
I would say there's 4 probably realistic ones in their organization. But, next on the list, and the last one in my group here is Gene Segura, just 31. Like, I think everybody assumes this guy's 37, right? There's still
it's been around so long.
Yeah, I think there's still lots of baseball here. He's got very similar to Didi. He's got one more season in Philly. I think, barring injuries, he's probably going to take a lot of at-bats this year. He obviously can still get hurt like any player. He had 514 at-bats last year, hit 290. Like, I bet you if you ask almost every fantasy owner out there, they wouldn't have put him as high as 290, right? I think the big thing is we want to see Gene Segura with 20 stolen bases, and we want to see him with 20 home runs, right? That's what we're looking for. We saw 14 last year in the home run department and 9 stolen bases. So 9 is a significant drop-off from the 20 and the 44 that we once saw. Robbie with a refill. Refill. Maybe that's what we should
Robbie
call
Refill, not Robbie Rebuilds, like my Instagram account's going to be. This one, I just wanted to let everyone know I did off camera. This is amazing. It's Guinness on the top, 100% Guinness. And then as you keep going, you start to get a little cider there. And then you finish cider. And you're like, get the hell out of here, cider. I need more Guinness. And then you refill it. And the best part about opening 2 tall boys is you get 2 big pints and plus a little extra.
Minor flex. Here we go. Gene Segura is back in the conversation at second base this year. I mean, I think he's very similar to what we talked about with Didi. I think qualifies as a shortstop because of the games he got last year, primarily a second baseman because of the team he's on, and extremely undervalued. And what I will add is that I think he could end up with some third base at bats this year, depending on what we see out of somebody named Alec Baum, who we'll talk about in the next episode. But at the end of the day, there's going to be at bats for Segura this season, and I think they're going to be ones that you should look forward to. There is an outside chance he could get traded. There was talks of that before the lockout here, that he would be on the move so that they could remove some money for one of the big ticket free agents here.
I do have to apologize because we should have moved Segura over to second base because that has been his primary position for the last 2 years. Prior to that, I mean, like, legit shortstop until 16.
But I mean, here's the thing though, he's a shortstop that's playing second base because he's got Didi on his team.
Yeah,
right? I mean, that's the reality. True. So yeah. I don't know that it's necessarily unfair to say it's kind of the same as Marcus Semien, right? A guy that is definitely a shortstop, but is playing second base because it's better for his career. And that's
as you said, Ty, about Segura, just to put a little pin in the third base thing until the next episode, but in 2020, Segura played 24 games of the 60 at third base before moving over to second base, or not moving over, but whatever. Then he went over to second base for the rest of the season once Baum was up. So yeah, it's not unheard of that could be where he swaps back to. He's got the arm. We all know that he's got the arm. And just so everyone knows, we're inside the top 30 now. Segura is number 29. Andres Jimenez with Cleveland is number 30.
Well, just a little fact about Segura that I'll say I didn't know either. 14 home runs last season was his second most in his career. I would never.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I would have guessed he had more than that. So 20 in the big 2016 season where he had 203 hits. But yeah, 14 is the second most in his career. Before that, 2 seasons of 12. That's the only other peak up there. But interesting though, definitely a speed contact profile. Nothing overly surprising about that, but at the same time, in my mind, I had built him up with a little bit more power in my brain.
Yeah. Okay. Well, either way, we know there's still plenty of career left for Segura, and it's just a matter of time. As will it be spent at shortstop, second base, or third base? Time will tell. Next guy up here is second base shortstop with the Cubbies. Now he's definitely going to be the shortstop. Nico Horner. I have a neighbor whose son, his name is Nico, and I asked him about Nico Horner, and he said, "Who?" And this kid loves baseball. So I said, "Well, you, son, need to listen to Dinger's fantasy baseball podcast." Anyway, just kidding. He's a great kid. And we have Horner ranked at 28 for us. He will now have everyday regular at bats. He's a pretty solid guy. It's a matter of what kind of production are we going to get? Is he going to be a 70-70 guy? When I say that, I'm referring to runs and RBIs. Is he going to get us 10 steals, 10 dingers? There's the potential for him to be a pretty good contributor the next 5+ years, only entering his age 25 season, and a lot of potential. The problem is that he was drafted and up so fast that we didn't get to see a pro track record for him. And what we need to see is what he realistically is day in, day out, get into July, August. It gets tough for some of these guys. We need to know what kind of production we can reasonably expect long-term. But I mean, Nico Horner is certainly somebody who is a good asset to have on a dynasty team.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. He did sneak in 149 at bats last year at the major league level and hit 302. So, I think we can be a lot less concerned with the capabilities to produce at the major league level. We're not going to get a ton of power here, right? This might be the softest hitting middle infield in baseball, but at the same time, ton of contact, right? And it makes up for the swing and miss power stuff that you have in the corners with Schwindel and Wisdom, right? Is it Schwindel?
Which is, yeah, no, you're right. And that's the funny part, Ty, is that you could have two guys. Now, Schwindel had a great average last year, but that's not his calling card. And not that he had any calling card before last year, much like Patrick Wisdom. They both came out of nowhere, but they should both start at first and third.
Before last year, Schwindel was calling collect.
he was calling Sal Perez and saying, can you please retire? And Perez was like, no, I think I'm going to drop 50 dingers. Right. But anyway, so if you do end up with Schwindel, who, again, crapshoot, right? Like what we're going to get from him in 2022, and you have Wisdom at third base, and then like you said, Ty, you've got high contact guys in Horner and Madrigal, depending on how they form that lineup and what they do with that outfield. And again, is it going to be Wilson Contreras, or is it going to be Yan Gomes? And if it's Contreras, you got a lot more power from your catcher position. You got a lot better hitter from your catcher position. The Cubbies could put some runs up. And that means that, Horner's going to get more runs himself. He's going to have the opportunity, depending on where he is in the lineup, for those RBIs. Like, this could be a big jump. And then we've got him ranked 28th, but that's because we're not sure what's up with those corner infielders. We're not sure what they're going to have in the outfield. So we need that certainty before we can say, oh yeah, like 70s, like I said, 77 guy. If he's getting 70 runs, 70 RBIs, 10 dingers, 10 stolen bases, I'm happy with Nico Horner, because I know that's the floor moving forward. If Schwindel's the real deal, if Wisdom isn't a 223 batter or whatever it was he finished last year, he's got to be a little better. He just had such a hot start.
Well, I think Nico Horner is a perfect comparison to the next guy on the list here.
JP Crawford?
I think profile's the same. Like, I think that's exactly what you're looking at.
So here's the thing with JP Crawford. He was like Mr. Top Prospect back-to-back years, right? Then came up with Philly and up and down and blah, 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 blah. Got traded to Seattle. Got to settle in a little bit. I think he got hurt because he doesn't have a full season. Then 2020, first full season, he was okay. And then what did he do last year? Got better. He got better, everybody. And he's going into his age 27 season. What can we expect from him realistically? Less than 5 stolen bases, because his career high is 6. Less than 12 dingers, because his career high is 9, which means he's going to need to walk into a couple extras in order for that to happen. But he's going to be pretty solid on your runs. He had 89 last year, and Seattle should be as good. They had a big September, and they had a really crappy, I think it was April, May. So if they're just better consistently, or I'm sorry, if they're more consistent, he should be right around that 85 number again. It's the RBIs, because he's leading off, or top of the lineup type guy. He's not going to have a ton, but if he can get 60 plus RBIs, that could put you in a great spot because he could end up with 110 RBIs. Like, you got a healthy Kyle Lewis, you get guys knocking him in. It could be a big year for Crawford. But again, you're getting no power, minimal steals. So they are very similar. And that's also why they're ranked where they are.
Well, I'm going to stomp on this fire just a little bit because I think with Kyle Lewis returning, the likely arrival of Julio this at some point later this season,
Yes.
and Kalenic hopefully taking a reasonable step forward, I don't see how JP Crawford remains the leadoff man. I just think it's realistic.
Oh, okay.
They
So do you
bump
think
him.
he'd go to the back of the lineup?
I do. Yeah, I think he
Okay.
ends up hitting 9. So I think that's going to really hurt his run in RBI production. So at the end of the day, like I think major drop off in those two numbers.
Well,
right?
I would say, Ty, that his runs would probably be close.
A little bit less.
If
a little
Seattle's
bit less,
better.
less just because of the at-bats, right?
Yes.
Like that alone will reduce that number.
Okay,
but
so let's say he's an 80 to 90 guy, and he was 89 last year leading off. He's an 80, and that's assuming that what you just said occurs. 3 solid outfielders, because they do have Mitch the real deal Haniger Holyfield as well for this season. And
you're
for
also
any
assuming
of the
that Seattle's gonna like repeat
win the World
what we
Series.
saw last year. Like they're gonna get better in ways, but I think they're gonna regress because that division's recoiling, right? Like Texas
100
got a lot better
160 wins. That's what I'm thinking. What were you thinking?
for the whole division.
No, just for Seattle.
No, because they're gonna lose every Marco Gonzalez start.
Hey, we're not talking Marco tonight. Anyway, all right. Well, I don't want to get too deep into the weeds on that part of it, but at the end of the day, I like that idea. If he moves back, you got to take that into consideration. Yeah. But that's also banking on, like I said, we don't know what's up with the outfield. That was banking on Mitch Haniger being good. That's banking on Kyle Lewis being healthy, Julio coming up, Kelenic being good. There's a lot of questions with those 4 guys. Plus, you got Jake Fraley, the walk machine. He's not really a walk machine, but he's okay. And there are questions. So, right. And then there's like all that infield. There's all sorts of things. But what we do know is JP Crawford will start 162 games if he's healthy. And that is valuable. And everybody in the fantasy world is not thinking that same thing with him. And imagine if Seattle's prospects came up and did well this year, or just whatever. They're young guys come up and do well this year. Everybody progresses as a team. They all take a step forward. That's going to help everybody's stat line. JP Crawford's included. If he can hit 270, that's great. If he's doing it from the 9 hole, that's okay too. So next guy up.
Yep, go ahead.
I just want to introduce it, and then I will walk away. The next guy up is Mr. AAA, because he was not doing it at the big league tie, and that's Jose Barrio with Cincinnati. He had a 200 average in limited at-bats. It was a 50 at-bats in the big leagues last year, and for his career, he's still under 130, so he's still rookie eligible in all your formats. But in AA and AAA last year, he batted .303 and had a .919 OPS and 19 dingers, as well as 16 stolen bases. I just want everyone to know you need to go and look to acquire this guy. This is not a Cincinnati bust prospect. This guy's going to get it done. He's going to get it done properly, and he's only entering his age 24 season.
Whew. That's a stamp of approval right there, Robbie.
Yeah, man.
I'm with you a little bit here. I'm not ready to like say everybody needs to acquire him. I think he is worth looking at. I myself have glossed over him many times and not really made the leap of the investment. I am excited about the power jump. I think the frame suggests he could add power. 6'2" shortstop again. We're into that. Are they 5'11" or are they 6'2", 6'3" conversation?
Yeah.
Right. And that's really what shortstop is. Like, you get one of those two things. Either you're
a dedicated website to accurate height of players and weight. That'd be amazing.
Or Major League Baseball just measures it properly every time, and you stop letting teams record it. Right?
Come on.
Yeah. It's like
you're a dreamer. You're a dreamer.
It's ridiculous. Like, it's not hard. It's called a measuring tape. It's been around for a long time. Like, let's get it together here, people. But anyways, the 19 home run jump is both an amazing opportunity and a possible red flag, right? So, like, where there's not a consistent growth trajectory to go from the 6'8" and then to 19. That's a bit of a warning sign of potential overbuying. But at the same time, like to your point, Robbie, like there's not a lot of people that are going to be on him, right? He's a
Right.
mediocre prospect on most lists that could give you huge upside. So that part I agree with. It's worth the risk as long as you're not overpaying for the risk. I think that's the big asterisk for me.
I think he is, if you have those A-level prospects, I think he is like the B plus level prospect right now. And that has to do with big leagues. In your smaller leagues, like 15 teams and under, it doesn't matter how many minor spots you've got, he's not nearly as valued. But
Yeah.
you get into the 30-team leagues, and then where I have him, he would be one of my top 5 prospects in the one league I'm specifically thinking of. He is absolutely one of my top 5 prospects. And every time a team is like discussing trade talks, and of course, right, it's dynasty, it's prospect related. You can't just trade a couple of guys at similar age in Major League Baseball who have similar contracts. No. You always need a prospect thrown in. And then they keep trying to like sneak Barrio as if like, oh, I don't know that he has potential to be an 8 category guy for me, or 7, because the Ks are not always a great thing with him. But I just don't, I don't think that he is, like you said, Ty, I don't think that he is top 100, gets the deal done by himself, but he is absolutely the guy with a potential to 2 years from now be Cincinnati's everyday shortstop.
100% agree. Couldn't agree more. Speaking of guys that could be everyday shortstops, this guy won't be because of who's in
The
front of him.
ceiling.
But this guy is a real deal. Or Elvis Martinez in Toronto. We talked about it a little bit earlier with Toronto's farm system having some shortstops in it. Keep in mind that Toronto's front office is the former front office in Cleveland, right? So we talk about shortstop factory. We're starting to see that rear its head a little bit in the Toronto system as well. And Martinez is a full tilt power guy. I think he profiles a little bit more as a third baseman, to be honest. And I think it's really interesting that they still have him at shortstop because you have Bo. Like there's a 0% chance that you're moving Bo off of shortstop for him. I just don't see him as the defensive replacement that justifies moving Bo. And frankly, if you didn't watch all the Jays games last year, you wouldn't realize how much better Bo got defensively throughout the year. He got significantly better. So I think the reality of anyone else supplanting him at this point is very low, in my opinion. But at the same time, this kid has the upside to be a major leaguer. 28 home runs last year, Robbie, at A and high A. Like that is a major high ceiling bat.
He hit 19 of those in a major league ballpark. That's right, everybody, because Toronto started in Dunedin last year, which makes it a major league park. But you're right. You're right. Like Elvis Martinez is going to be a non-high average guy. He is a power bat. It's the concerns with the Ks, right? We don't want to start to see him having a 35% K rate or anything like that. But he's 20 years old. So last year he played in Vancouver, which is now high A. That is a change. It was short season A before. He was about 4 years younger than the average competition. That's where he moved up to. His A ball with Dunedin, he was 2.5 years younger than the competition there. And that's where he played the bulk of last year. So just so everyone's aware, he moved up. He continued to do exactly what he was doing in Dunedin. And he's even younger than the rest of the competition.
I think the big thing too, 19 of those 28 home runs happened at A ball before he moved to Vancouver. We saw a reduction in the average, but in a really small sample, right? Like that's the thing. Everybody that moves up to a higher level should struggle, right? I mean, that's the point of progressing through the minor league levels. You're being challenged in a different way. So we don't have enough of a sample at high A to be alarmed by anything. The strikeout numbers are very reasonable. Only 28 strikeouts and 112 at-bats at high A. So nothing to be worried about. I think the average is just the result of a small sample. And I think we'll see closer to that 260, 270 number that we get really excited about with the power profile. So I think that's what we should be looking for. What we'd really love to see is a AAA season at 290 with 35 home runs. But I don't think he'll play a full season in AAA ever. That's, I think, the reality of being a high-end prospect. So, but a guy to be excited about. If you don't know about him yet and he's somehow available in any format that you're in, you should probably try to grab onto him. A guy ahead of him in our list here, the intro to the show today, Dansby Swanson, everybody's favorite shortstop until the month of June. Dansby Swanson, if you want to get off to a hot start, you roll Dansby Swanson out April and May, you'll be pretty happy with that outcome. If you want to be really disappointed, you roll him out July through September, because he disappears in every single season in the second half, but runs out some clutch at bats when it matters. I'll give him that. He is a bit of a clutch guy, just fades a little bit in season.
And 27 dingers last year, career high. He also had 78 runs, 88 RBIs, both career highs for him as well. And the average, although it came down from 2020 of 274 down to 248 and OPS at 760, that's pretty much what you can bank on for him. And that's great. And the reason why is the last episode we talked about what's reasonable to expect from your position players and how you have that scale, and that so few guys, a third of the league, bat 250 or higher, that it's okay to have a guy who's right around 250. He is at no point going to be hurting you, except, as Ty says, when he goes into a long slump, which for him is the month of June. So if you are able to have one of those far away Freddie Galvis type dudes in their final type year, as a year over year, it seems like it is, and a Dansby Swanson, legit shortstop guys, when one's slumping, you can put the other in. And I mean, to Dansby's credit, he's been crapped on a lot by fantasy owners because he's never done enough. And last year he put together really good counting stats, 9 stolen bases. He's typically been 10 stolen bases, strike short in year 5, which, level that out, he would have been right around that 10 mark again. And then last year, 9. So it's not enough that people are like excited about it. But if you do that little tick up, then yeah, he's 10 stolen base guy, 20 plus dingers. Let's see what he can do this year to really level off, because the power is pretty good for him. And I mean, where we've got him ranked at 24, he's only entering his age 28 season. Lock him up if you can. If you're able to get him, yes, there are guys who are going to put 100 runs, 100 RBIs on the board, and there are 30 plus dinger power as we go higher up the list. But you can also go and be more aggressive in other positions if you've got a guy like Dansby, who's the everyday starting shortstop on a competitive Atlanta team. Nothing wrong with
I agree. Dansby's not going to hurt you. He kind of fits into like my Yadier profile at the catcher position, right? He's just a guy that's going to give you mediocre numbers all the time. And there's nothing wrong with that as long as you make up for it by buying somewhere else to give yourself that edge. Jumping up the list here, a guy you really are excited about, Robbie Noelvi Marte in Seattle. Jerry DePoto's replacement for JP Crawford here. You have
when
the floor,
it comes,
my friend.
Yeah. Well, when it comes, I mean, this is somebody who I heard from DePoto himself say, between Kelnick, Julio Rodriguez, and Marte has the most raw power. And that was a year and a half ago, something like that. And I was like, really? Like the most raw power? Well, what did he do last year? 17 dingers in his first full season at A and high A, and 273 average, 825 OPS. And you're like, oh, like that doesn't sound amazing. Yeah, I mean, he was only like 4 years younger on average than everybody that he played against. No big whoop. The guy is going to be absolutely destroying Double-A when he gets there this year. And it's all over after that. He's going to be a top 10 prospect everywhere. If he isn't already, jump in now
on Baseball America right now.
Okay, there you go. So he is getting up there. So there is still the possibility that you can get him. And keep in mind what we said about JP Crawford, and Ty talked about, well, the possible slip to the 9 hole. Well, if you can bring in a power hitting shortstop, and he's basically doing the things that Crawford isn't, it's the defense that's got to make it up for Marte so that it makes sense to trade Crawford or whatever you're going to do, even if it's trade Marte. It's totally possible, right? Like if Seattle's competing, if there's that blockbuster type trade out there, the Max Scherzer type trade, maybe that's something that happens. But keep in mind, no matter where he goes, you're going to want to have him. Like he's not, I don't see a park where I'm going to be like, oh, I wish he didn't go there. He's already in Seattle.
He did make 30 errors last season.
Could have happened to anybody.
When A-ball, 30 years is a lot.
Well, I was just going to say, when we talk about third base, I have a major amendment to my rankings, and there is a player who I have just been against, who I have I've hugged it out with him. The grudge is gone, and his errors, Ty, are one of the reasons why I absolutely despise him as a fantasy owner. And I decided I needed to let that go. Let that go. Even if Marte moves to third base, which I know if you can't make the throw from short, moving over 20 feet to third base probably isn't going to make that better. But hey, maybe he's your second baseman. Whatever it is, he's going to, let's just call him a bat first infielder. He's going to be desired.
Well, in a lot less innings, right? So Marte had 810 innings, right? So take this with a grain of salt. And comparable, we had CJ Abrams, roughly, what do we got here? 278 and 55. So 340, roughly. No, 330. Had four errors, right? So if we multiply that by the innings, right, let's call it 10, 11 errors comparably. That's a big gap. So I think to kind of the similar points we've talked about with other guys, I don't see Marte being a shortstop. Like that is a huge red flag. Novelli Marte is going to be a third baseman in all likelihood, given that profile. Usually those kind of guys slip to the corner, because if he's making that many errors at shortstop, he's probably going to make similar number at second. So third base is the logical landing spot. I think we'll see him down the road. Jumping up our list to the next guy here, Gabriel Arias in Cleveland in that shortstop factory. This is a guy I have ranked a lot higher than Robbie.
Which is odd, because I like him. Well, I like him, and he had a huge minor league season at AAA. But he just, when I was doing the unbiased part of my rankings, he was just falling. And like so that's part of it for me. Like, I can't just be like, I really like him, so I'm going to rank him up 15 spots higher. I would like him. He's ranked 31st for me, and we're at number 22 right now. I would like him to be up higher, but it's just so clogged in Cleveland that I think that must have had a lot to do with how he ended up getting, chunked down. But I mean, this is next man up, right?
Like, I think he's gonna be starting shortstop this season. I really do. I don't know that he's going to start the season that way because of the way Cleveland runs the money side of their business. But I think we'll see Gabriel Arias this season in Cleveland as the guy with the starting job. You mentioned, Jimenez possibly being a second baseman on that team. I think that's very likely for him in that position. But at the end of the day, I really see Arias as the best of the three between Rosario, Jimenez, and Arias. I think Arias is the guy there. I do think Rosario started to get some time in left field last year. I think we'll see that continue this year. Jimenez is going to probably start at second as Freeman kind of gets a little bit of extra seasoning. I really don't know what they're going to do with Jimenez because I don't think he's better than Freeman. Right. I don't know if they're going to try to trade for one of those things they call outfielders.
They love those.
They don't know so much about those guys, but at the end of the day, like, they got a real surplus in the infield that they need to trade from, and we'll talk about another guy that's going to be in that conversation next week again. But at the end of the day, I see Arias as the 1A, and I think there's 2 1Bs at the shortstop position in Cleveland, so it'll be interesting. Spring will be really important for these couple of guys.
Yeah, and somebody who was living and dying in San Diego got to Milwaukee, and it appeared as though he may have been dead, but has come back like the Undertaker at name your WrestleMania. Luis Urias, that's not how you do the transition. Man, these crown floats are good. So 25-year-old this year, finally, Ty. I mean, it wasn't great. Finally established himself as an everyday starting player, and we have high hopes for a guy like him moving forward, but not so high that he's inside our top 20. Right? There are gaps, there are errors, there are things that we can see, but he's young and he's got opportunity. And as we talk about a lot, Milwaukee's a good team, so you can find yourself getting runs. You can have guys on base for the RBIs. It's just good to see that he wasn't wasted. Right now, we're more worried about Keston Hiura than we are about Luis Urias.
Well, I mean, I've always been worried about Keston Hiura, in most formats. That said, the thing with Urias for me that I would say I'm most excited about is his profile took a major pivot last season, right? We talk about a guy that batted 320 all the way through the minors, right? Like this is a guy we fully expected to be JP Crawford, right? I mean, 299, 333, 296, 296, all the way through the minors, with a reasonable on base percentage, 404, 398, 398, right? So kind of your profile, Robbie, the guys you like to like.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, with 23 home runs last year and just under 500 at bats, like I think if we could get him to 280 next year, I think this is a top 10 shortstop potentially.
Well, what I was just going to say is because I know we're going to get this, that we're going to say, well, Willie Adames was the shortstop in Milwaukee. He is the shortstop in Milwaukee. Well, Urias played 68 games last year at both third base and shortstop, as well as 25 at second base. We put him in at shortstop because that seems to be the more valuable position to have a guy at. But if it does work out that he ends up moving over to one of the other positions, you'll see the rankings reflect that next year. So we put the value at shortstop because that's what they do when they're developing the guys. So it's entirely possible that Urias may be wire to wire third base this year, because we were talking about that a year ago, how they seem to be really set with the middle infield, but they didn't have, what was it, like Matt Duffy? They had nothing at third base.
No, Matt Duffy's in Chicago.
No. But there was something like that, like where it was just like, well, I mean, I know Matt Duffy did like a couple.
Didn't they roll Travis Shaw out there for a
maybe
little bit?
That's what it was. Who ended up in Toronto? Yes, but it was just where we were.
But
like,
I think Travis Shaw was back
the
there
boy.
last season.
He started in Milwaukee and then moved.
No, I think he ended in Milwaukee at the end of the season. I don't know where he started. Anyway, point is, Rowdy Talese can't play third base. That's what we know.
That's what. So your Nick Madrigal is Rowdy Talese, the guy to mention every episode. So anyway, but whatever. Urias is fine. You shouldn't be upset anymore. 249 average last year, 789 OPS, 23 dingers, 75 RBIs, and the runs were 77. Thank goodness, right? If you held on, good for you. Again, he was 24 years old last year. No time to cut bait and walk away. But I was done with them last year because I just didn't think it was going to come together. And I was trying to bank on higher ceiling guys like the next guy up, Amid Rosario, who I thought the move from the Mets to Cleveland was going to be great. I had him ranked at 20th last year. I've got him up in my teens this year, but he ended up with our combined rankings. I moved him back this year because I feel like we've gone the other way with him, but he's sitting at 20 for us now. And to your point, Ty, talking about Gabriel Arias, talking about all the other guys that can come up, I just don't know if is Amid Rosario the next Jose Iglesias, where he just kind of kicks around and no one appreciates what he does because he's not going to get 75 runs, not going to get 75 RBIs, not going to have 20 dingers. He's just going to be a guy who's okay, but he's under all those kind of milestones that we keep as fantasy owners.
I think he's going to play left field. I really do.
You really think that's his move? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I think he's going to play all spring in left field. I think that's the reality. You just look at what they have in Cleveland. Like the assumption is Jose Ramirez is going to get traded as soon as we get through this lockout here. And there's nobody to fill that spot. And Rosario is probably the best profile before Nolan Jones arrives. But I think at the end of the day, you've got depth now at the position, and it makes a ton of sense, honestly, to move Ramirez and put Rosario over there because you're not extending Jose Ramirez. So why even attempt to hold on to him? You're going to want to trade him and turn him into some value. And I think it makes a ton of sense for Rosario to slide there. But, I mean, at the same time, like the depth chart suggests their left fielder is going to be Josh Naylor. The problem is their depth chart also suggests that Josh Naylor is going to be their right fielder. So that is a conflict.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they also have, Oscar Mercado and Bradley Zimmer, neither of which are overwhelming. So this is why I think it makes a ton of sense to move Rosario to left field and give him the at-bats without impacting the other guys.
Okay, that's fine. Now, next guy up is Power for Days, Jorge Polanco with Minnesota entering his age 28 year. Polanco 269 average was great. He's consistently over 250, so you don't need to worry about a huge average dip for him. Runs last year were 97, RBIs 98, and I love that. But I just don't know the consistency that we're going to see within him. And I know this is his prime, but I feel like this is where we might start to see him dialing back. Now, Ty, you've got him up a lot higher than I do. He's 19th for us, but you've got him at 13. I've got him at 26. So are you seeing consistency that I'm not seeing here? Like, you think there's the ability for him to just year over year do this?
I mean, here's the thing. He's a starting shortstop. He's a switch hitter, so you don't have to worry about platoon splits. But at the end of the day, like, this is a guy who has elite upside, right? Like, elite. Like, this guy could be one of, if not the best shortstop fantasy guy. Like, he has that potential, right? Is he going to achieve that every season? No chance, right? But is he going to be a guy that could have one of those surprising years when you look at the end of the season, you're like, what do you know? He finished first in our fantasy league. That's very possible with Jorge Polanco, and that's kind of why I have him up that high. His splits are very reasonable, 273 against the lefties, 267 against the righties last year. I mean, the big gap is the power. It's comes from the left side against the righties. 24 of his 33 home runs were from the left side. So, lots to like there. The big thing that hurts him is actually his home splits, right? His home splits in that big ballpark are where he really gets hurt.
The big outdoor, cold to play in ballpark. Yeah.
That's
negatively
right.
affected.
So if you definitely own him, and realistically, like, let's assume that Minnesota lineup's gonna be more productive than they were last year, right? They can't be a ton worse, right? You miss Buxton for a good chunk of the year. Donaldson had some tough stretches. You've got some of the young guys starting to maybe either turn the corner or be replaced by somebody else in that system. You got to assume the support should be better for Polanco, which is why I have him higher. Like, there's just too many positives here and not enough like red flags to be like, I don't like it. The upsides outweighs the downside.
Okay. Well, sure. Fair enough. We got another guy who I think could end up being a top 10, a big jumper for us. He's consistently moved up my own rankings year over year, the last three. Willy Adames now with Milwaukee, and my God, did it ever not lightning in a bottle, but struck gold with that Adames trade. Because prior to the trade last year, Adames was sub 200 average, 625 OBP, and 5 home runs in 132 at bats. He gets traded, gets triple the playing time, a little bit less, but just wait for this part. 20 dingers is what he got as Milwaukee, with Milwaukee. 285 average, 886 OPS. Ty, is Willy Adames a future top 10 shortstop? He's only entering his age 26 season.
No chance.
And why is that?
Because I think he's going to be consistently. I do like him to be up there. I do think he's going to be consistently in 10 to 15. I think that's his happy zone, right? A guy that I have nothing
for dingers. You're talking about power wise.
No, Joe, I'm saying 10 to 15 in the
ranking.
Yeah, like, I just think
10 is a top 10, Ty. So you mean 11?
It's okay, 11 to 15. Thank you for the semantics. But
I'm big on stats.
The point is that he's going to be, I think, happily in that range a lot. I don't think he has, like, if you were to say who do you want to with more upside, Polanco or Adames, I'm taking Polanco all day, every day. And I don't even think it's a remotely close variable there. But if you were to say, who do you think is the safest guy over the next 5 years, I'm taking Adames. So, pick your poison depending on the rest of your team and how you want to build that out. So I think very good question is those two as a comparable. Which one do you want to take? I think it's a great one to put out maybe on the old Twitter account, which you can get at DingersPod or at RobbieBaseball1 and at Turney Boss here for me.
Well, depending on how many more of these crown floats I go through, and I'm not saying how many I had before we started recording, I will probably get that done in the morning and not tonight. So depending on when you're listening to this, it might be over, or I still may not have post it. But anyway, next guy up here, this is our top rated prospect, Marco Luciano, who will enter this year or play this year as a 20-year-old in low A and high A last year. He had himself a regular season, 258 average, 815 OPS. He was good for 19 dingers, 6 stolen bases, 71 RBIs, and runs are kind of irrelevant, but 68. Luciano playing way above. Same thing as we mentioned with some of the other guys. Over 3.5 years age difference in most of his levels, high A specifically. I mean, this is like the next guy up, right? It's in San Francisco. This is Brandon Crawford's replacement. It's just, is this 2023 opening day type guy or very early in the season? Or could we possibly see him as late as 2024? And I'm thinking it's 2023, and that's why he's ranked where he is.
Yeah, I'm having trouble saying it's 2023 right now. I mean, everybody loves this guy. I mean, everybody. This is a guy that universally is a big deal. Baseball Prospectus actually has him in the top 10 right now, which is bold. And I don't necessarily disagree, but I also think it's a little premature to get him that ramped up. 258 last year at A and high A. Like, that to me is the big red flag. Power is there. 19 home runs, again, as a 20-year-old is a good number. 815 OPS, a good number. 122 strikeouts in 395. Not the worst, but the contact, like the base hits, like that's my concern. So I really want to see that average hit 280 this year at AA. Like I need to see that growth for me. If not, I'm shying away because we just end up with another swing and miss prospect that hits 30 home runs but strikes out a billion times. So we got lots of those guys. I am concerned that he's one of those guys. I will be honest. Like, I'm very, very concerned that he fits that profile. So this year for me is a big year on Luciano, but I agree if he can surpass that, then I think we get really excited about where he could be.
Agreed. Next guy up is polarizing. It's Alberto Mondesi with Kansas City. This poor sap, only going into his age 26 season, weight of the world for fantasy owners has been on his shoulders for years because, Ty, he is a big home run, although his career high is 14, and a big stolen base guy, which his career high is 43. He also has a 32 season and strike shortened 2020 at 24, which led the league because that September he was the best player in fantasy. And last year in a injury riddled season, oh my gosh, he came back for, I don't even know if it was like 10 games in between injuries, but ended the year with 126 at bats, still got 15 bags. That's his whole thing. I talked about over a year ago my concern with his strikeout to walk, which last year was disgusting. It was like 8-1. The guy will not be an 800 plus OPS hitter for you. He will not have an average better than 280, but we're okay with that if he's stealing 40 plus bags. This is, to me, the ride or die. If you are cool with the rest, meaning the injury time missed, the big strikeouts, the few walks, the average that's going to be okay, but it's not going to help you, whereas some of the other guys are much higher average above him. He's a buy. But if you are concerned that stolen bases are not the best thing to have, then you want nothing to do with Mondesi because he is so freaking risky otherwise. And the power is not a real thing. Can we just agree to that, Ty? He had 6 this year, 6 in the strike shortened last year. He had 9 in 19 after his breakout 18, which that breakout 18 was 14 dingers.
It's not on brand for me to agree with you, so I cannot do that. I do think the power is underappreciated here. I'm not going to say it's a power bat because I just think that's unrealistic. I think it has more to do with hard contact than it has to do with power, if that makes any sense. So I think he has power. I just don't think he has the hit tool to take advantage of it. So that's why when he does connect, it goes for days. Like, he hits some big home runs for a guy that has a fairly reasonable frame, but not an overwhelmingly robust frame either. 6'1", 200 for a speed guy is big, right? Like that's a big frame for a 43 bag kind of guy. But he runs into some of these things, and we've seen some big numbers out of him on the distance. So I like him as a buy. You mentioned that. I really do. I like him as a buy this offseason because I think most people are tired of owning Mondesi. And I think his biggest mistake was when he dropped the Raul Mondesi name. I think he should go back to that this season and just absolutely
that'll just sort it all out.
Well, I mean, you know exactly what that brings to him.
How long have you been waiting to drop that this episode? Like we're at an hour. We're 90 minutes. You haven't dropped anything.
I'm probably gonna have to drop like 4 more before we're done here.
You're like, wait a second, I can drop that. I have this button.
Well, and the thing is, too, the guy next on our list just drips swag. So I mean, Brendan Rodgers.
Oh man. Now the other thing that Brendan Rodgers has been dropping is the ball a lot, but he finally got himself 415 plate appearances last year, 284 Colorado average, 798 Colorado OPS, 51 RBIs, 49 runs, and 15 dingers with 0, count them, 0 stolen bases. So even in your 5x5, Brendan Rodgers is only going to be a 4 category plus 0 guy, but it's Colorado, and he's the shortstop of the future. So I think that's a good thing. It's just a matter of how good is the power going to be? How high can that average get? And thank God he entered last year with prospect eligibility because he was only at 102 at bats and he did not suck. Sorry, he was at 97 at bats and he did not suck last year. Thank goodness.
Yeah, I think this is going to be one of the guys that we talk about at the end of the season jumping on to team post type, right? And although I want to drop an audio right now, I'm going to leave it just in case I want to use it again later. But assume that I dropped a team post type thing here because I think that's exactly what he is. I think he has the upside to be a very valuable shortstop prospect. And I think he's going to be given the shot this year to get there. And I think it's why Colorado was so comfortable making the move. I mean, there's rumors that they want to try to re-sign Trevor Story, which would be an epic failure on the part of Colorado. Like, did they learn nothing from the Arenado saga? Like, it's time to rebuild, and they need to do that. And Rodgers is a guy that can fill the shoes at shortstop. So is he going to be Trevor Story? No. Trevor Story is a special kind of player. But, at the end of the day, there's a lot of undervalue, or Brendan Rodgers comes in way undervalued at this point, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it's because he was a prospect from the time he was 18 years old, much like Zach Veen is going through right now, where everyone's like, oh, man, it's Colorado outfielder, raw tools, blah, blah, blah. And Zach Veen, thankfully for himself, and something we talked a lot about, was he performed last year, which we've talked about guys who have not been able to go and do it, and to tell everybody, pump the brakes on Zach Veen. Now's not the time. He's ranked so high. Go get yourself a college guy, get 2 years of play out of him, and then you can make that deal. But Brendan Rodgers, the time is now, much like it is for 23-year-old Pittsburgh shortstop O'Neal Cruz, who, Ty, I just got to say, this is a 5-category guy. The strikeout to walk, 2-1, whatever, 3-1 in previous seasons. But high average, good OPS guy, over 800 OPS, average over 300, and 20 steal, 20 home run potential. Man, I love that. But you're not as sold as I am. Is there a reason that you have a hesitation and have him? He's 14th for us. Brendan Rodgers is 15th. Mondesi 16th. Luciano 17th. Is there a reason that he's in your 20s?
I don't think he's going to flourish immediately at the major league level, right? I think picking apart minor league pitching is one thing. Doing it at the major league level is another. And it's very hard to do when you're 6'7", right?
But Ty, he batted 333 this year in Major League Baseball.
Yeah, okay. In his 9 at-bats, 3 hits.
Yeah.
One ding-dong, though.
Boom!
So, you know what we need? We need the internet sound that says ding-dong.
Like the emotional damage one? Have you
Emotional
come across
damage.
that yet?
Yeah,
But
I
you
mean,
know
if
that
you
one.
well, if you're basically a fan of name any AL Central team, you have emotional damage.
Emotional
So,
damage.
but I mean, for me, I just think 6'7" at the major league level is going to get picked apart, and I'm not
Okay.
ready to say like
You
look at
didn't
Gregory
like Judge
Polanco.
either, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but Gregory Polanco is a guy that fits the profile in Pittsburgh of a guy that was supposed to be great, big frame, big upside, lots to like, good minor league numbers, right? All these things lined up as a sure first ballot Hall of Famer. O'Neal Cruz fits that categories for me, and I'm not saying he can't be good because I do think he's going to have some success. I'm just not ready to give him the first, let's say 2 years of 5. I think are going to be a little harder, but I do think years 3 through 5 are going to be pretty successful.
Okay, that's fair. Well, let's go to the next guy, Paul DeJong, with St. Louis, because we talked about the St. Louis clog in previous episodes. But
Future
last year,
New York Yankee Paul DeJong.
okay, well, I was just gonna say after a 197 batting average last year, and this is in 356 at bat, so not a tiny sample. It was power or nothing, and he was 3-1 strikeout to walk with 103 Ks and 19 dingers, only 4 stolen bases. I feel like my belief in his bounce back might really suck, and there's probably 7 or 8 guys that I could see doing better than him, but I just don't think he's as bad as last year.
Oh, there's no way. He's definitely better. He is the starting shortstop in St. Louis. I know everyone assumes Sosa is going to come in here and he's Xavier Edwards, right? Like at the shortstop position. I mean, Sosa is going to give you good defense. He's going to be a reasonable option. Paul DeYoung's the guy. And if he's not there, St. Louis isn't good enough to win in the playoffs. Period. So if they believe that in St. Louis, then they need to trade him. So I think there's a really interesting scenario where he becomes a third baseman in New York and Gio Urshela becomes a shortstop in New York. I think that could very plausibly happen heading into this year. You could also move Glaber back to shortstop and Urshela to second or DeYoung to second. But either way, like DeYoung's a pretty good defensive shortstop. So, I think there's a good fit there. I do think St. Louis is going to be smart enough to hold on. They've got a really reasonable contract here for the next couple of seasons. They've got team options on the next 3 years. So I think there's going to be a ton of reasons to keep him there. The contract's silly, 6 years at $26 million. Like that's nothing. It would be a bad financial decision on St. Louis's part to move it with the flexibility built in. So I think we're going to see a bit of a return to what we saw in 2019, 30 home runs, 233 batting average. That's what I'm looking for. I'm punting average as a Paul DeYoung owner, like that. You just know
Okay.
that, right? You have to understand that. Good strikeout numbers. Everything else says it's a power profile guy. Period. That's it. But I think starting shortstop, I'd be buying because I think most people are selling.
What about the next guy up, Ty? We're now at number 12 here. Bobby Witt Jr., which I must correct. I said Marco Luciano was our top-rated prospect. He's not. And again, we're talking about 5-year MLB production and the difference between the 2023 and 2024 start versus Bobby Witt, who we absolutely expect to be up as early as the suppression ends next year. It's just a matter of where exactly does he fit in with this Kansas City team.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's the opening day starter. He was almost the opening day starter last year, right?
That was the talk of the town. Yeah.
Yeah, they flirted with it. I mean, the numbers are here, right? We got 285 at AAA last season and basically half a full season, right? I'm actually shocked. And I mentioned this last year after the spring. I was shocked they sent him to AA last year after the spring that he had. Like that was telling to me, like everyone's like, oh, we're gonna see him in a couple weeks. I'm like, I don't think so. They sent him to AA. Like that suggests that they think he needs some seasoning. But 33 home runs, 97 RBIs, and under 500 at bats. Like, I mean, these are numbers to be excited about. I don't think he has a ton left to learn at AAA. And so the only reason he starts in the minor leagues is suppression. There's no other argument for me, or the worst spring ever. So I think it's Bobby Witt time. I think they're going to have to figure out what to do with Mondesi this season. They
I
have,
honestly feel like Mondesi just moves to third because that's what they did last year.
yeah. I mean, they've got room. Like, there's neither second or third has a sure stopper there, right? Like, we're assuming
Well,
Witt's in the outfield now, or
I was just going to say Merrifield played second base predominantly last year, and he can move back to the outfield. I don't know that they necessarily want to DH him because he's a valuable asset, but the outfield that they had, like Michael Taylor, Kyle Isbell, who was the other one that I like?
Benintendi.
Benintendi, thank you. Like
The only wild card here for me is Hunter Dozier, right? Like, what's he going to be this year, right? Like, we saw a bit of a
watching
regression.
Mondesi. That's what he's going to be this year. He's going to be watching Mondesi
For sure, for sure.
because he
But
regressed.
100% he did. So, he still had 16 home runs. Yeah, there's enough there that maybe there's some bounce back here. But age 30, Hunter Dozier, I think it's time to be unexcited about him for most fantasy formats. But here's the catch: he's not a free agent until 2025 because they locked him up for 4 years. So there's going to be some incentive to get Dozier back to what they want him to be, which suggests Witt to the outfield, Mondesi to second, Dozier at third. That's possibly the reality. We'll see. There's lots of options there, lots of flexibility, but I do think the shortstop position is going to be Witt. I think that's just the reality. Whether it's in June or starts in April, that's the question.
Well, our friends over at Roster Resource, who we are always scratching our heads at, have penciled Bobby Witt Jr. in as the starting third baseman. So we will have to see how this all pans out. But let's go to a player, big contract, new team, number 11 ranked, Javier Baez with Detroit. Is it safe to say that Baez is sailing a bit on the average? And I don't mean that he is Joey Gallowing it. He's not hitting 203 like he did in 2020, but he's going to be a 250 to 265 like he was last year, average type guy. Or is he more the Met that hit 299? And we know the power's there with him. 31 dingers last year between the two clubs in the NL. But do you think the average is, I don't know, let's say 265, which would he finish at last year? Do you think he's a higher average than that or a lower average than that in the next 5 years?
I think he's more what we saw in the last half of his stay with the Mets. Like, I think he's going to be on the upper tier. I think there was just a complete disruption in his life for the first time in his professional career last year. I really like AJ Hinch as a manager, right? I really think that's going to be good for Javi Baez. The big concern I have is the power numbers, right? Detroit has a huge ballpark. That Detroit team is going to get really good here in the next couple of years. Like, I really like what Detroit's building up towards. Mm-hmm. To me, I am just trying to figure out how many home runs he's going to hit. I think that's the big question mark I have. And I'm trying to find one of those cool images that tell me the overlay of the ballparks and how many home runs. But for whatever reason, the one that looks like I'm supposed to be trying to find doesn't work properly. So
if the website's not working, you're probably on rotorani.com.
We haven't made fun of Ronnie enough lately.
No, but he'll love this part. Anyway, so with Baez, we're just trying to figure out if the power is going to be zapped a little bit. I do want to move into our top 10, and the next guy is Francisco Lindor with the Mets. And if I told you, Ty, that a guy that's a top 10 shortstop has gone from a 284 average to a 258 to a 230, and he's in your top 10, you got to be saying, like, well, what else is he doing, right? Well, last year, I think we can agree, was a major disappointment for dynasty owners. But the caveat is that you now have the off season with all these disappointed Lindor owners that you can go and try to pick their pocket.
Yeah.
Because you've talked about it before, when you change from the AL to the NL, it is not a small, it is a major adjustment. And Lindor certainly had his struggles with it. However, he still wasn't terrible. He had 10 stolen bases, 20 home runs. But runs and RBIs were not his friend with, 73 and 63 respectively. He is a much better player than that. And year over year, he has been in the 80s and 90s for runs and RBIs. The average home runs for him prior to prior to the shortened 2020, he was averaging north of 30 in his career, and his batting average was consistently in the 270s. I can't think of somebody who's got a bigger bounce back that you can pencil in than a 28-year-old Francisco Lindor.
Yeah, I agree. I'm wanting to buy him absolutely everywhere. I just think he can't possibly be worse than he was last year. The power numbers just disappeared. That's just not who he's been for a while. So I think there's an obvious bounce back here for Lindor. Here's a good question for you though, Robbie. Who do you want buys Lindor? Which one are you buying?
Lindor.
Interesting. Okay.
I think there's a more complete player with Lindor um, than I do with Baez.
Which is fun because you have them in the opposite order on your list. That's why I asked. I
Yeah.
trapped you in that one.
Well, but the thing is, Ty, I blindly begin my rankings where I don't see the player. I just have how I have a list of ways in which I rank players with the players' names hidden from me. And then I begin to see the players and I make final adjustments. And I can't reasonably say that just because I like someone better, I'm going to just go ahead and ignore the fact that the stats for Lindor have gone in the wrong direction for 3 years and certain things are affecting those. And I don't know that the AL East is the right division to go to when you're in Cleveland and you were able to have a couple crappy teams. The NL East is not a crappy division, so it's going to be tough for him. And with Baez moving to Detroit, he's basically going to Lindor's old stomping grounds, but he's going to get to beat up on Lindor's old team. So
I agree. And it's interesting because you have two guys that are obviously in the upper echelon of talent potentially. But Javier finished September with a 361, 1018 OPS, right? So,
it was
he
huge.
had
After
a
he yelled at the fan base and said, "You guys
good.
suck," he turned
They do
around
suck.
and just like
Everyone
stomped
knows the
all over
Mets
him.
fan base sucks. Like that's not shocking to anyone, right? The Mets fan base is one of the worst in baseball. Like I mean, that's not shocking. At least not to me. Maybe it is to others, but I'm certainly not of that scenario. Whereas just flipping over to Lindor's, September 267, 933. So we started to see the power come back. 9 home runs in September, which is promising, right? So I'm very curious. Like this is going to be a good debate to come back to at the end of the season.
Definitely. Next guy up is free agent Trevor Story with Colorado. Ty, you mentioned him a little bit earlier. Now he had a dip in average last year, 251. He's typically been a 280 something, or better average guy. OPS has consistently been 900 in full season ball. Last year was still at 801 in what you could argue is a down year, but he had 24 dingers, 20 stolen bases, and 88 runs with 75 RBIs. Just a good player. And we need him to go somewhere that allows him to still be just as good, like Arenado moving from Colorado to St. Louis in that blockbuster Austin Gomber trade. So Story, I like. I've got him, he's ranked 9th for us. I've got him inside my top 10, just as you do. He's 29 years old. We got lots of baseball left, and we know he's going to get a contract that exceeds the 5-year window that we look at. So I think he's kind of a lock to just be almost a Mr. Consistent. I don't have this is when we get to this point, it's hard to argue. We typically don't have guys in the top 20 where one of us just hate the crap out of them.
Well, and especially at this position, right? Like you have such an elite tier from here in, probably more so than any other position in the game, right? Is this top 10 is probably the best at any one position for a fantasy purpose, right? So Trevor Story is going to be better no matter where he goes because Colorado's a dumpster fire. It was time to get out. Why they didn't trade him, I don't know. But anyway, that's the point. Xander Bogaerts ahead of him is a guy that I think most people still, honestly, continue to underappreciate. Like this guy just goes out and gets it done very quietly. It's not flashy. He hits home runs. He hits for average.
A million doubles. That's the big thing for me with Bogaerts is that he's an extra base machine, and where he lacks in stolen bases and high end home runs, he makes up for it by consistently being an OPS guy.
Yeah, I mean, there's just lots to like here. I mean, we mentioned in the last guy, there's just not a lot to dislike at this part. And the Boston lineup's strong, and it'll be strong again this year. The OPS has always been a great thing for him, and in the last 5 seasons, I think probably the most underrated shortstop in the game. To be honest.
I'd agree with that. Next up here, ties Wander Franco at number 7 for us. That's
Who's
right,
that?
everybody. He's not the top ranked player. Last year, though, we did respectively have him ranked 22nd and 20th. And as we said to everybody at that point in time, because there was a little bit of why would you do that? You're way off. We said, well, we don't know that he's going to get any significant time. And he did. He got 281 at bats last year, which I didn't think he was going to get half that. So kudos to Tampa Bay for not doing the Tampa Bay thing and the MLB thing and suppressing the crap out of the player, letting him go. And this is what we got. But the only knock I'm going to give to him, Ty, is we're still not seeing the home run power. We got the double power. We got 5 triples out of that, but we did not get it out of the park. And I think that's going to end up being the knock on him. I mean, he's entering his age 21 year. That's going to end up being the knock on him until he becomes I don't know, 30 home run type hitter.
I mean,
right?
he is a free agent in 2033, so we do have that to look forward to.
Yeah, he is. He's locked up for our 5-year window here. If he ends up as a Tampa Bay Ray after that, I don't know.
I love the minute he gets signed. Everyone's like, "Which year is he going to be traded?"
That
like,
was the huge thing on Twitter. Was like, what year?
So funny.
What year?
But anyway, the point. This guy's so exciting. I mean, I hate that he's in our division as Jays fans. I hate it because he's so good. Like he really is. But the thing that you and I talked about this time last year was that the power wasn't there for us all to be shooting for the moon with this guy in 2021. Now, should we see some progression? Sure. Like he might hit 20 home runs this year, but is he going to hit the 40 that everyone thinks he should hit? He's not. He's just not going to do it. I don't know that he's ever going to eclipse 30 home runs, but I do think he's going to hit a ton of doubles. He's fun to watch. He's a good hitter. Like he's going to do all of those things. Yeah. And he is great. He's a great baseball player. He's great for the game. He's going to do a ton of stuff. But I'm not ready to say, like, if you were to say, is he going to be better than Tatis? I don't think so. Is he going to be better than Bichette? I don't know. I really don't. Like those 2 guys to me are the best at the position right now. Overall, Trey Turner's right there too. But, we'll get to these guys here in a couple minutes. But I don't know that he has the same power as those guys.
Well, and it's not just the power though, Ty. It's power and it's stolen bases. And if you combine those two and say, what's the number going to be? And you've got a guy like Tatis and a guy like Bo and a guy like Turner, you can say 60. Between those 2 categories, those guys could easily have 60 of them. And then runs and RBIs. Well, between those 2 categories, I can safely say that Tatis should have 200, Turner 200, Bo 200, even Corey Seager could have 200 in that category. Well, then there's a little drop below that. I can't safely say that I can say Franco's going to have 60, and I can't say that, some of the guys left, Correa, Anderson, that we haven't yet mentioned, that they're going to be in that club. And the same thing goes with runs and RBIs. Maybe they make it with runs and RBIs like Anderson, but I don't know that we can say that about Correa. Also, Correa, next guy up, by the way, free agent Carlos Correa, 6th. Doesn't have a home, but does have a great track record. And even last year, just, murder balled it with 26 dingers, 279 average. Stolen bases were 0. And that's why he is not ranked inside the top 5, because that potential is not there, because there is no track record of it. And I don't know, there's a lot to say. It doesn't really matter where he goes. He's going to be Carlos Correa, and it's always going to be, can he get the 640 at bats that he had last year? Or is he going to be the Carlos Correa that for years and years was struggling to hit 500, right? He had 1 season with more than 481 at bats. Sorry, not even at bats, plate appearances. And that was 2016 until last year when he finally had 555 at bats. So that's the issue with Correa. That's the only issue with Correa, and he's just not going to steal you bases. So he's a 4 category elite shortstop. I'm looking for 5 category guys in the top 5.
And defensive stud too, like doesn't get mentioned enough. So, we talk about a lot of these top tier guys, like, outside of, I don't even know, Tim Anderson, maybe, like Carlos Correa is probably the best defensive guy in the top tier. Lindor's good, but Correa's better, right? Like, and that's the thing. So Correa's going to get run out at the position forever, never ever going to change. The one thing I'll just backpedal really quickly to Franco.
Sure.
Probably the most consistent guy in this top group. I think that's going to be one of his calling cards as a fantasy player. Is I think the other guys are going to have better streaks, but I think Franco is going to be the guy that's there the most often. Just as a quick point.
Hey, Ty.
And then, yep, go ahead.
Why do you love Wander Franco so much?
I watched the progression last year. It was there, right? I'm still not ready to put him as a 1. I don't know that he'll ever be a 1, right? I think that's the reality. I think there's always going to be somebody that has higher upside in a couple other categories than he does, but I do think he's going to be a staple inside of our top 5 forever. I just think that's the reality. Yeah.
All right. Next guy up is in our top 5. That's Tim Anderson. I love that Tim Anderson is going to have an OPS over 800 for you. I love that his average is going to be over 300 for you. And I love that he's not going to completely screw you over with stolen base. He had 18 last year. I would say that's going to be repeated again this year. Now he is entering his age 29 season. Runs and RBIs, he combined for over 145 last year. Sorry. And I think that's right around where he's going to be again. And I love that for him. And the leadoff guy for the competitive, high octane White Sox. He's the kind of guy I love to have on my fantasy teams. He's also the kind of guy that's almost impossible to trade for because whoever has him is probably willing to deal, but you just got to overpay. So if you are a Tim Anderson guy, you will have to overpay, I think, to have him on your team. But I don't think it's a bad choice.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the crazy part is, if you can believe this, is that I think the White Sox underperformed offensively last year. Right? You miss Jimenez most of the season, right?
Yep.
You got Andrew Vaughn coming into his own. Right?
Robert missed a ton of time.
Right. So I think the reality is like Anderson was really good last year, but he should be better, right? He's going to have protection. There's going to be more guys on base. Like he's missing Magical, the franchise, as you mentioned. But yeah, other than that, like this is going to be a really good opportunity for Anderson to cash on a lot of this stuff here. So I think the reality is good season ahead for Anderson. I like your aggressive nature on him. I just have other guys ahead of him, which, you know, we're allowed to disagree.
Makes sense.
But
yeah,
I still reality. If I own Tatis in a lot of places, so I've been in on him forever, everywhere. So I don't necessarily have a need to buy a Tim Anderson. But if I was restarting in this format, like given some of the other positions, I'll probably end up with the Tim Anderson just based on where I would not draft these shortstops in opposition for being secure at other positions.
All right, Ty. The next guy up is yours. It's 28-year-old Corey Seager, now with Texas, formerly of the Dodgers. He is ranked 4th for us.
Yeah, I got him 5-year sticks. I mean, I take back what I just said about Tim Anderson because I would for sure own Corey Seager. There's no other option.
Really?
He's my guy. I love Corey Seager. I think
he just can't get at bats. Like he's never healthy since where are we here? 16. He has not had a quote full season of baseball. He's had last year 553 at bats. He had a full 2020. I guess I should give him that. And he should be, and this is why he is ranked this high, Ty. 300 plus hitter, but he just doesn't steal bases and he doesn't have monster power.
Yeah, I mean, a healthy Corey Seager is locked in.
I think a baseball player, great, but not as great of a fantasy player as a Tim Anderson.
I just think his value is down. I love him because his value is way down versus his upside. Okay. Very similar to Correa. Like they've both fought injuries. Right. And I think people are a little naive when it comes to shortstop. Like shortstop's a very demanding position physically, right? Center field, catcher, shortstop are all very hard on the body, more so than the corner outfields, corner infields, and in pitching in most cases. But, at the end of the day, like we should expect our shortstops to be hurt. So if you're not carrying an extra depth shortstop, you're an idiot. Like seriously.
Whoa.
Seriously. If you don't have a backup shortstop on your team, like you're like we're take our home league, for example, Robbie, 14 teams, and I have Seager and Tatis, right? So I reinforce my position on this statement with that as my depth. So That's
Okay.
I feel very strongly about this because you're going to have injuries at shortstop. It's going to happen. It's not an if, it's a when.
Well, if you're the
It,
Tatis and Seager owner, you're
yep.
absolutely going to have
So, but look at this though.
injuries.
But listen to this. So Tim Anderson's been relatively healthy the last couple of years, but he went through a stretch before, right? But
Yes, he
Tatis
did.
was hurt last year. Trey Turner's had a lot of injuries. Bo hasn't yet. Seager's had injuries. Correa's had injuries.
It's almost like the position's physically demanding or something.
100%. That's the point. That's what I'm getting at. So anyway, Corey Seager's my guy. I think as a top 10 guy, most undervalued, Xander Bogaerts, then Corey Seager. I think that's the way I would say that.
So we've got our top 3 where none of our top 3 rankings all line up, but they go, just so everyone knows, and then we'll just have the discussion. Tatis is ranked our number 1. Trey Turner is ranked our number 2. And Bo Bichette is our number 3. Ty has Tatis as his number 1. I have Turner as my number 1. And Bo is 2 for Ty and 3 for me. Bo Bichette had a monster 2021. Monster 2021. He's a 300 average guy. He is an 800 plus OPS guy. He had 25 stolen bases, 29 dingers, 102 RBIs, and 121 runs. Amazing season. Absolutely amazing season. And he's only going into his age 24 year. Holy crap. For that to be our 3rd ranked guy, that is impressive. Impressive
and
stuff.
Here, this is legitimately the reason I put Bichette ahead of Turner. I think Turner's due for injuries, right? He's had
he's already had them. They're all done.
I know, but I think he's due for another one. But the big thing for me with Bichette is that I think because of Simeon leaving, I think Bo moves ahead of Laddie into the 2 spot. And I think that's a game changer for him on the runs and the RBI side because, he's going to have Springer and probably combination of Espinal and Jose Ramirez ahead of him. Sorry, getting ahead of myself. But
whoa there.
When Jose Ramirez is traded
preseason projections, Ty is like, hey, I got this idea.
Point is, I think he's going to be in a better position. Whether it's him in the 2 spot or some trade for an asset that could be Jose Ramirez into that 2 hole behind George Springer. Like, I think he's going to have more RBI chances regardless.
Okay.
That's just the natural thing. And I think he's evolving. And I think the big progression for Bo this season will be the plate discipline because up until now it's been brutal, but he has ridiculous hand-eye coordination to fight off a lot of tough pitches. So like none of these guys in this list have the ability to fend off pitches the way Bo does. It's not even close.
Okay, so that's Bo wrapped up. Now I'm going to say that there is a tier drop that goes from 1 and 2 to 3. And the difference is this: 1 and 2, and Trey Turner specifically, Ty, and you have fallen victim, and it's not your fault. Blame it on the media. Trey Turner has been healthy since 2017 season ended. He played all of 18, all of 19, all of 20, and all of 2021. Okay. So we've got 412 at bats in 17. Since then, it has all been, even the 2020, it was all basically full season ball for him, 59 games in 2020. And the difference between him and Bo is the batting average. Bo's batting average is 300 hitter, but Trey Turner is 320 plus, and that's great. OPS, Bo is a 800 plus guy, and Trey Turner is a 900 plus guy. And that's amazing. And both are great. And Bo could absolutely be better. Trey Turner's also 5 years older. So in 5 years, Bo Bichette could have put together the resume that I'm now talking about with Trey Turner. But I just think that he's going to continue to do it. And the stolen bases and the power for the guys are identical or very close to it. 32 stolen bases last year. And in the previous 2 seasons, not counting 2020. So the previous 2 full seasons, 35 and 43 stolen bases. Ty, I'll even go back to 2017 when he did get hurt. He had 46 stolen bases, but the power tick has gone up for Turner as he's aged and the stolen bases have not fallen off. And I love that. And I love the fact that Trey Turner has 1 more year with the Dodgers and potentially gets to resign because Seager did leave town. And that's the big thing for me why Turner became my number 1 is that I believe his injury risk is not that of our number 1 guy. So if you want to talk a little bit about dislocated shoulder Tatis, I have said my piece on Trey Turner.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Like, I think the Padres are going to make a really simple decision this offseason. Is the shoulder okay to say a shortstop? Yes or no? And I think this is the end of the conversation. If they think yes, he remains a shortstop. They have him signed up for a ton of money. So they need to make a very serious decision
Yeah.
that there is no wiggle room on. Like, there
And it
is none.
seemed odd that he just didn't get surgery initially because it's like, well, let's go fix it. But I think the fear was, let's not build up scar tissue if we don't have to. And that I just know from a history within my family, my sister having shoulder surgery and talking about scar tissue and restrictions and things moving forward. Now, Fernando Tatis Jr. is not the rock wall climber that my sister was. He's a professional athlete. Things will heal differently, but he signed a massive contract and then said, I'm just going to play through it.
I mean, here's the
Twice.
thing, though, right? Like, so Trey Turner had a great season last year. No argument against that. Trey Turner's a good baseball player. No argument against that. In 595 at bats, which is almost 130 at bats more. Not quite. 117 more at bats than Fernando had last year. Fernando had 42 home runs to the aforementioned 28 home runs, 32 stolen bases against 25 stolen bases, right? So the power numbers to me,
yeah,
give
he's
him
got
the advantage.
better OPS. He's got a better OPS and less stolen bases.
And the second part is that, like, with Seager leaving, I don't think the Dodgers are nearly as good as people think they are, right? Their pitching's not as good as it should be, right? Unless Bellinger goes back to MVP level, like, what do the Dodgers really have? Like, they've got AJ Pollock, they've got Trey Turner, and then they've got a bunch of guys that could be good, right? Max Muncy could be good. Justin Turner could be good. Will Smith is great, right? But, like, after that, it falls off. Like, Chris Taylor's not going to win you all the games that Corey Seager did. I mean, that's just the reality. And so, to me, like, Trey Turner is in a worse situation than he's played the last couple seasons. He has to be the straw that stirs the drink. And yes, he can be part of that solution. But if you were to give me Tatis on a mediocre roster, which is the Padres, they're mediocre offensively, right? And the Dodgers, which I think are mediocre offensively, give me Tatis all day, every day. And then if you give me Bo versus Turner on a really good roster in Toronto offensively, I'm taking Bo. So that's how I got there. Tatis, Bo,
All right.
Turner. That was the logic.
Well, there is a 50-point batting average difference between Tatis and Turner, and it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. There's also a huge injury risk because we know Tatis is still dealing with something that wasn't dealt with, and that's fine. And it's fun to argue the top three because we're normally talking about guys that are ranked in like the 40s at a position and why one should be better than professionals. Right. Yeah. I mean, allegedly, unless you're a Canadian trucker. So anyway, Ty, that is first base. And we have made the 2022 convoy from 62 all the way to number 1. Good for us. Yeah. Shortstop is a monster position. And this was a long episode to cover it.
Absolutely vital position. It's a big one. So
you don't punt shortstop. You don't punt shortstop.
No, you don't. But we'll leave it there, Robbie, because we have drawled on a little bit. But shortstop's important. Make sure you get hooked up with a good guy for the long run. And if you got questions about the guys that are coming, if you don't own one of the guys that are here, you ask us at DingersPod on Twitter. But until next time, it's been Rob